It was supposed to be a quiet night, the kind of night where no one notices you, where the world continues to spin without a care in the world, and you're just another face in the crowd. But for Keanu Reeves, nothing in life was ever that simple. Fame had followed him for years, and no matter where he went, the world always seemed to be watching. The flashing cameras, the endless interviews, the constant attention, it was overwhelming. So Keanu decided to disappear, but not in the way you might think. No big announcement, no press conference, just a quiet exit. He walked into a small, unassuming office building in downtown Los Angeles, donning a plain janitor's uniform and carrying nothing more than a mop and a bucket. On that ordinary Wednesday evening, he became just another face in the crowd. Another janitor, silently, sweeping the floors. But what he didn't expect was that his decision to lay low would lead him to an astonishing discovery, one that would change everything. As Keanu mopped the hallway, he couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation coming from the nearby offices. At first, it seemed harmless, people chatting about their day, discussing deadlines and work drama. But then he caught something that sent a chill down his spine. "Did you hear about the missing files? People are starting to ask questions." Keanu stopped, his mop frozen mid-swipe. Missing files? What kind of files? His curiosity piqued, but he quickly shook it off. It was probably nothing. But the words echoed in his mind, an unsettling feeling creeping up his spine. And then the moment that would set everything into motion happened. He accidentally knocked over a trash can near the break room, and when he bent down to clean it, he spotted something unusual. A set of keys. They were too fancy to belong to just anyone. A few seconds later, a woman walked past him, glancing at the keys, but not noticing him at all. She was deep in thought, her phone in hand. But it wasn't the keys that caught Keanu's attention. It was the way she walked, like she was hiding something. What was going on in this building? His mind raced as he gathered his cleaning supplies. His plan was simple: do his job, stay under the radar, and leave. But now he wasn't so sure. Something felt off. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. No, he had unwittingly stepped into something bigger than he could have ever imagined. And he couldn't help but wonder, was he in over his head? The questions lingered, and with them the promise of something much bigger unfolding. What would Keanu do with this newfound knowledge? Would he stay out of it, or would he dig deeper? The stakes were rising, and Keanu was about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Keanu had always been a man of mystery. For years, he had lived under the spotlight, known to millions as the laid-back action star who could charm both moviegoers and critics alike. His iconic roles in films like The Matrix and John Wick had made him a household name, but with fame came an exhausting reality. Behind the camera, Keanu was different. Off-screen, he was known for his quiet nature, a humble man who seemed to avoid the trappings of Hollywood's glitz and glamour. Yet even with his modest demeanor, the pressure of being a global icon had begun to weigh on him. Everywhere he went, there was always someone watching, someone who expected something from him, whether it was a photo, an autograph, or just a glimpse of the Keanu magic. The world demanded more than he could give. The constant barrage of attention left Keanu feeling isolated. It was hard to find genuine connection when you were constantly surrounded by people who only wanted a piece of you. Despite his success and fortune, Keanu felt trapped in a world that no longer felt like his own. Then came the turning point. The moment when he realized that fame, despite all its perks, was something he needed to escape, even if just for a while. The pressures of being Keanu Reeves had taken their toll, and he longed for something simple, something real. He needed to be anonymous again, to just blend in with the crowd and be treated like a regular person. That's when the idea hit him. Why not go undercover, Keanu thought. Why not just disappear for a while? So he did. No flashy retirement. No grand statements to the press. He simply packed up a duffel bag, left his luxury apartment in the hills, and found a small, quiet janitorial job in a nondescript office building on the edge of town. His plan was simple: show up, do his job, and be left alone. He didn't even need to make friends, he just needed to be Keanu without the world watching. The first day on the job felt surreal. The uniform, a plain white shirt with the word janitor stitched across the chest, was a far cry from the suits and leather jackets he was accustomed to wearing on the red carpet. His new colleagues didn't look twice at him. He was just another janitor, just another cog in the machine, and that was exactly what Keanu wanted. As the days went by, Keanu began to settle into this new life. The job was simple enough. He'd sweep floors, take out trash, and make sure the bathrooms were clean. The routine was soothing, and the anonymity was liberating. He didn't have to worry about how he looked or how people perceived him. He was just a guy doing his job, and that was enough for him. But as much as Keanu relished the normality of it all, something strange began to happen. He started noticing things in the building that he hadn't expected. Odd conversations between employees, hushed whispers in the hallways, and a sense that something wasn't quite right. At first, he chalked it up to overactive imagination. But after hearing a few hushed conversations about missing documents, suspicious behavior, and threats against people in the building, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. Keanu had never been the type to meddle in things that didn't concern him. He preferred to keep to himself, stay out of drama, and leave the world of scandal to those who thrived on it. But now, as a simple janitor in a building that seemed to be hiding something, he couldn't help but feel drawn to the mystery. What was really going on here? And why did it feel like the deeper he went, the more he uncovered? Keanu wasn't sure how far he wanted to go, but he knew one thing for certain. The ordinary life he had hoped for was beginning to unravel in ways he never expected. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Keanu Reeves had always been a man of few words, someone who preferred to observe the world around him rather than get involved. But as the days passed in the small office building, his simple routine started to feel off. It was a subtle thing at first, an odd glance from an employee, a door left ajar when it shouldn't have been, conversations cut short the moment he walked by. But the more Keanu noticed, the more he couldn't ignore it. Something was happening behind the walls of this unassuming building, and it was bigger than he could have imagined. It all started on the third week. Keanu was mopping the hallway near the break room when he overheard a conversation that would send a shiver down his spine. Two employees were talking in hushed voices, their words sharp with urgency. You can't just delete the files. Someone will notice. What if they find out? Keanu paused mid-swipe, the mop frozen in his hands. His mind raced. Files? What files? He couldn't make out the rest of the conversation before they stopped talking and scattered in opposite directions. But the words echoed in his head, repeating over and over again like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Keanu wasn't sure what was going on, but the fact that they were so worried about files that might expose something, told him it was serious. He needed to find out more. That night, Keanu lingered after his shift, his thoughts consumed with the mystery. The building was nearly empty, with only a few employees working late into the night. He had a perfect opportunity to investigate. His janitor's cart was filled with cleaning supplies, but tonight it served another purpose, as the perfect cover for what he was about to do. Keanu knew the building well by now. He'd cleaned every floor, wiped down every desk, and emptied every trash can. But there was one area he hadn't explored, the locked storage room at the end of the hall. He had seen the janitorial key on the key ring, but it hadn't seemed important before. Now, it was all he could think about. He felt a surge of adrenaline course through him as he approached the door, the key in his hand. His heart pounded as he slid the key into the lock. It clicked open, and the door creaked on its hinges as it slowly swung inward. Inside, the air smelled stale, untouched by the outside world. Shelves lined the walls, some with boxes and old equipment, while others held large filing cabinets. That hadn't been touched in ages. The room seemed harmless at first, but as Keanu stepped further inside, he noticed something strange. The filing cabinets, once neatly labeled, had been hastily shoved to the back, their contents spilling out in disarray. Keanu's eyes narrowed. He didn't know what he was expecting, but it wasn't this. Among the scattered papers there were photographs, pictures of people he didn't recognize, each of them looking serious, almost grim. What struck him the most were the names and dates written on the back. Some of them were crossed out, others circled in red ink. It wasn't just random paperwork, it was a list of people involved in something big. Keanu's fingers hovered over the papers. What is this? His thoughts raced. But before he could process anything further, he heard a noise, footsteps approaching down the hallway. Panic surged through him, and without thinking, he shoved the papers back into a drawer, slammed the cabinet shut, and quickly exited the room, locking the door behind him. He leaned against the wall, breath shallow, heart pounding. He had just stumbled upon something dangerous, something that he wasn't supposed to see. What kind of operation was going on here? And who was behind it? The feeling of unease settled deep in his gut. The building, which once seemed like a peaceful escape from his life as a celebrity, was now a web of secrets and lies. Keanu knew he couldn't just walk away from this. He was already too deep. As he returned to his mop, trying to regain his composure, a new thought formed in his mind. What if the people in this building weren't who they seemed to be? There was something far more sinister at play here, and Keanu wasn't about to let it go unnoticed. But how far would he go to uncover the truth? And would he be able to escape unscathed once he did? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The next few days felt like they were dragging on forever. Keanu could feel the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. He had tried to shake it off, to continue with his routine, but the feeling of unease lingered. Every time he walked through the building, he couldn't help but notice the strange looks people gave him, eyes that darted away when they saw him coming, whispers that stopped the second he entered the room. He had become a part of something bigger than he ever intended, but Keanu wasn't the type to let fear rule his decisions. He had spent a lifetime facing danger in movies, playing characters who had to fight their way out of impossible situations. This was no different, at least that's what he told himself. In fact, he'd played characters who had survived far worse than this. So, despite the growing tension, he decided to lean into his curiosity. The mystery he had uncovered was too compelling to ignore, and it was driving him mad not knowing the truth. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the building, Keanu stood outside the storage room once again. His hands clenched around the key, his heart racing. He was starting to realize that the longer he waited, the harder it would be to keep his distance. The room beckoned him, and it was time to find out exactly what was going on. With a deep breath, Keanu unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air felt colder this time, and the room seemed even darker than before, as though the walls themselves were closing in on him. His eyes quickly scanned the shelves and cabinets, searching for something, anything that would explain what he had seen. There was a sense of urgency now, a feeling that time was running out. Then his eyes fell on something new, a metal briefcase sitting on the floor near one of the cabinets. The case was locked, but it was different from everything else in the room. It had a sense of finality to it, like it held the key to everything he had been trying to understand. Keanu didn't hesitate. He crouched down, his fingers brushing over the cold metal. The lock was simple, and with a swift motion he opened it. Inside, there were more documents, much more than he had ever expected. The papers were thick and dense, filled with confidential-looking text. But it wasn't just the documents that caught his attention. No, what really grabbed him were the names and locations, coordinates, dates, and names of people he had never heard of. But there was one name that stood out above the rest: Claire Williamson. The name was underlined in bold, and there was a photo attached. A woman with short dark hair looking directly into the camera with an intensity that sent a chill down Keanu's spine. She was listed as a key player in whatever was going on, and her picture made it clear that she was someone important. Keanu's heart thudded in his chest as he scanned through the rest of the papers. The more he read, the more he realized the full extent of what he had stumbled upon. This wasn't just a corporate secret or a minor scandal. This was something far darker, something that involved powerful people, dangerous alliances, and operations that spanned far beyond the walls of this building. He needed to know more about Claire Williamson. Who was she, and what was her connection to all of this? As he dug deeper into the files, he found a contact number, an address listed under her name. It was a lead, something tangible in this sea of confusion. Keanu couldn't ignore it, but just as he was about to make a decision, he heard something that made his blood run cold, a voice coming from the hallway. "I know you're in there, Keanu." Keanu froze, his breath catching in his throat. There, standing in the doorway, was one of the employees he had seen around the building, the same one who had been whispering about the missing files. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed a sharpness that made Keanu's stomach churn. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice low, almost a warning. Keanu felt his pulse race. He had been caught. The game had changed. Now, he wasn't just a janitor in a building full of secrets. He was in the middle of something dangerous. And this woman, Claire's ally perhaps, was here to make sure he didn't get out with the truth. "Who are you?" Keanu asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. The woman smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "I'm someone who's been watching you, Keanu. And now that you're involved, there's no going back. You're in too deep." For a moment, neither of them moved. The tension in the room was palpable, like the calm before a storm. Keanu could feel it. He was on the brink of something big, something that could tear apart everything he knew. His heart raced as he glanced around the room, mentally calculating his next move. It was time to make a decision. Would he run? Would he confront the woman? Or would he do something else entirely? Keanu knew one thing for sure. His life had just become a whole lot more complicated. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The silence between them hung thick in the air. Keanu's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to show fear. He wasn't about to let Tito, this woman or anyone else, intimidate him. "Who are you?" he repeated, his voice now more forceful, demanding an answer. The woman's lips curled into a knowing smile, but her eyes were cold, calculating. "I'm someone who's been hired to clean up messes, and right now, you're the mess." Keanu's mind raced. He had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than he had ever anticipated, and now, standing face to face with this mysterious figure, he realized just how far he had gone down this rabbit hole. This wasn't just a simple conspiracy. No, this was a well-oiled machine, one that had operated for years without anyone noticing. But Keanu had seen too much, and he wasn't about to back down now. "You don't have to do this," Keanu said, trying to find a way out of this escalating situation. "You don't have to be a part of whatever this is. You can walk away, just like me." The woman's expression didn't change. "I'm already too deep, Keanu. We all are. You should have stayed out of it when you had the chance." The weight of her words hit him hard. She was right. He had been better off staying anonymous, mopping floors and minding his own business. But now his curiosity had led him to this moment. There was no going back. His mind flashed to the folder he had found. The names, the photos, the evidence. Claire Williamson. The files pointed to a far-reaching network, one that wasn't just confined to this office building. It was global, involving corrupt officials, high-level executives, and possibly even people he'd trusted in the past. His chest tightened as a sickening realization hit him. He wasn't just dealing with petty office politics. He was caught up in something much bigger. And now Claire Williamson was a name that haunted him, a woman at the center of it all. "Tell me about Claire Williamson," Keanu demanded, his voice edged with urgency. The woman's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, almost imperceptible, but it was enough for Keanu to catch. She wasn't expecting him to bring her up. That small reaction told him everything he needed to know. "You have no idea what you're getting into," she said, her tone colder now. "She's not someone you want to mess with. Trust me, you'll regret it." Keanu's mind was spinning. Claire Williamson wasn't just a cog in this web. She was the mastermind. She was the one pulling the strings, orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. But why? What was her endgame? Before he could ask another question, the woman took a step closer. "You've already seen too much," she whispered, her voice deadly. And now, you're going to be a part of something much bigger than you can handle. In an instant, Keanu felt a sharp, overwhelming fear, something he hadn't experienced in years. The woman wasn't bluffing. She wasn't just trying to scare him. She was in control, and she was about to make him an unwitting pawn in whatever game she was playing. "You're not the only one with secrets," Keanu said, his voice low and steady, masking the growing anxiety in his chest. "I'm not backing down. I'm going to find Claire, and I'm going to uncover the truth." The woman's smile returned, but there was no warmth in it. "You think you can stop this? You can't even see the full picture yet. You're too late." Keanu felt his world shifting beneath him. This wasn't just a matter of finding some files or taking down a corrupt corporation. No, this was about survival. His survival. The survival of everyone involved in this twisted game. He had to find Claire. He had to expose whatever dark secret was buried beneath all of this before it was too late. But the moment was fleeting. The woman's hand shot out, grabbing him by the collar and pulling him close. Her eyes were cold, hard. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Keanu. You're playing with fire, and when it burns, you'll wish you never got involved." Keanu's heart skipped a beat, but instead of recoiling, he stared her down, his eyes unwavering. "I don't need to know everything yet. I just need to know one thing." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Where is Claire Williamson?" Keanu demanded. The woman's expression darkened, her grip tightening. "You really don't want to know, Keanu. You have no idea what you're walking into." But Keanu wasn't backing down now. He had come too far. He had to know the truth. There was no turning back. Her face softened for a split second, almost as though she was contemplating something. Then, with a resigned sigh, she released her grip on his collar and took a step back. "I can't protect you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "But if you really want to know, head to the old warehouse at the docks. That's where it all begins." The words hit Keanu like a bolt of lightning. The docks? What was waiting for him there? He had no idea. But this was the moment he had been waiting for. The next step in this perilous journey had just been laid out for him. Keanu's resolve hardened. He couldn't let fear hold him back. The truth was just within his reach. And now, he had a destination. The warehouse at the docks would reveal everything. "Thank you," Keanu said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his chest. The woman didn't respond. She simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Keanu stood there for a long moment, the weight of the situation settling over him. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a man on a mission, one that would take him to the heart of a conspiracy that threatened to unravel everything. The only thing he knew for certain was that the next chapter of this story was going to be the most dangerous one yet. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The night air was damp as Keanu stood outside the old warehouse, the city's skyline barely visible in the distance. His hands were steady, though his heart raced with anticipation. This was it, the culmination of everything he had discovered in the past few weeks. The mystery, the secrecy, the danger, it had all led him here. And he wasn't going to stop until he had answers. The warehouse loomed in front of him, an imposing structure that seemed to hold centuries of forgotten history. Its windows were boarded up, and the rusted metal doors stood as if they hadn't been opened in years. But Keanu knew that inside something dark and dangerous awaited. He approached the door cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the still night. His mind raced with questions. What was Claire Williamson's role in all of this? Who were the people behind this operation, and what did they want with him? His thoughts were interrupted when he reached for the door handle. It was unlocked. Without hesitation, Keanu pushed the door open, stepping into the dimly lit interior. The warehouse smelled of dust and old wood, its air thick with the weight of secrets long buried. The faint sound of distant chatter reached his ears, and as he moved deeper into the building, he noticed several people standing in the shadows. They were talking in low voices, but the moment Keanu stepped forward, their conversation stopped. All eyes turned to him. "Keanu Reeves!" a voice called out from the shadows. Keanu's eyes darted in the direction of the voice, and there she was, Claire Williamson, the woman whose name had haunted him for days, the woman who held the key to everything. Claire was standing there, her posture confident, almost regal. Her eyes locked with his, and for a moment time seemed to stop. The tension in the air was palpable, as if both of them knew this moment had been inevitable. "Welcome, Keanu," Claire said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been expecting you." Keanu didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took in his surroundings. The warehouse was filled with high-ranking officials, business people, and a few armed guards standing watch. It was clear that this wasn't just some underground operation. It was a well-funded, organized network with deep connections, and Keanu had just walked right into the lion's den. "You've been digging into things you shouldn't, Keanu," Claire continued, her voice calm, almost too calm. "I admire your curiosity, but you're far out of your depth now." Keanu's mind raced. He was face to face with the mastermind of it all. This woman, whose name had appeared on every document, whose face had haunted him in his search for answers. He had to know the truth, no matter the cost. "What is all of this, Claire?" Keanu asked, his voice low but determined. "What are you really doing here? Who are you working for?" Claire's lips curved into a smile, and she took a step forward. "I don't work for anyone, Keanu. I make the rules. I'm in control of this world." She gestured around the warehouse, as if showcasing the empire she had built. All of this is just a small part of a much larger plan, a plan that you've unwittingly become a part of." Keanu's mind spun. A plan? What was she talking about? How had he become involved in something so vast, so complex? This wasn't just about a few files, it was a conspiracy that stretched far beyond the walls of this warehouse. Claire's eyes darkened as she moved closer to him. "You're here because you're the last piece of the puzzle. Your curiosity, your quest for the truth. It's been leading you straight to me. And now you'll understand exactly why you can't walk away." Before Keanu could respond, Claire turned to the group of people behind her. "Take him," she ordered sharply. The armed guards lunged forward, but Keanu was ready. With a burst of adrenaline, he dodged the first guard and took off toward the nearest exit. He wasn't sure where he was running, but he knew he couldn't let Claire and her network trap him. His every instinct screamed that his life depended on it. The sounds of footsteps echoed behind him as he sprinted through the dark corridors of the warehouse. He could hear voices calling his name, but he didn't stop. The warehouse seemed like a labyrinth, and he was determined to find an exit before they caught up with him. The walls were closing in. This was his last chance to escape the nightmare he had walked into. Finally, he burst through a side door and into the open air. The cool breeze hit his face, and for a moment he felt a surge of relief. He had escaped, but he wasn't out of danger yet. Keanu ran, his legs pumping as fast as they could carry him. He didn't know if anyone was following him, but he couldn't afford to look back. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing was clear. He couldn't let them win. He couldn't let Claire and her network continue their operation. He had to expose them, no matter what it took. As he reached a nearby alley, Keanu stopped to catch his breath. His chest heaved, and the adrenaline coursed through his veins. He knew he couldn't go back to the building. He had to take this to the authorities, to someone who could stop them. But with Claire's influence and power, that wasn't going to be easy. Looking up at the sky, Keanu felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a game anymore. This was a war, one he had been thrust into whether he liked it or not. And now, it was time for him to take a stand. He couldn't run forever. With newfound resolve, Keanu took out his phone and dialed a number he'd kept hidden, the number of a trusted journalist he had met years ago. He wasn't going to fight this alone. This was bigger than him. He needed help. As he waited for the call to connect, Keanu realized that, no matter how deep he was in, there was no turning back now. He had found the truth, and now he had to bring it to the world. The game had just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Keanu's phone buzzed in his hand as the call finally connected. He pressed the device to his ear, trying to steady his breath, but his heart still raced from the escape. The adrenaline was still coursing through his veins. But now, he had to think clearly. This wasn't just about getting away from the warehouse. It was about bringing down Claire Williamson and the shadowy network she was a part of. The stakes were higher than ever. "Keanu?" came the voice on the other end, the familiar tone of a journalist he had worked with in the past, Kate Sullivan. What's going on? You sound out of breath. Kate, listen to me, Keanu said, his voice urgent. I need your help. There's something huge going on, something dark, and I've just uncovered it. I can't do this alone. You need to get people involved, trusted people. We need to expose everything. Kate was quiet for a moment, likely trying to process the gravity in Keanu's voice. Keanu, you're not making sense. What are you talking about? Keanu took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. He had to explain everything. But there was so much that had been left uncovered until now. I found a network, Kate, a global network of corruption, manipulation, and power that stretches beyond anything you or I could imagine. The woman behind it all is Claire Williamson, and she's involved in some serious operations. Everything from corporate espionage to political sabotage. It's all connected. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Keanu could practically hear Kate's mind racing as she tried to piece together what he was saying. Keanu, are you telling me that you stumbled into some kind of conspiracy? Yes, Keanu answered, the weight of the truth settling over him. And now they know I'm onto them. They've been watching me. I barely got out of there, but it's not over. I need you to help me expose them. Kate was quiet for another moment. Okay, let's say I believe you. What do you need from me? Keanu's mind was clear now. He knew exactly what he had to do. I've got evidence. I've got names, documents, locations, everything you need to connect the dots. But I can't go public with this yet. If I do, they'll come for me, for both of us. I need you to investigate this further. Find the connections, get the right people to back us up. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. This is insane, Keanu. But if what you're saying is true, this could bring down some very powerful people. You sure you want to go down this road? Keanu glanced over his shoulder, making sure no one was following him. The silence of the night was eerie. There's no turning back now. I've seen too much. If we don't expose this, more people will suffer. Kate hesitated for a moment, then gave a reluctant sigh. All right, Keanu, I'm in. But we need to be smart about this. I'll get in touch with some people I trust. We'll move carefully and we'll make sure this story gets out. It's not just about you anymore. It's about taking down a system that's been in place for years. Keanu could feel the relief settling in, but it was tempered by the knowledge of the danger they were now both in. Thanks, Kate. I'll send you everything I have, but remember, they'll be watching. We can't afford any mistakes. I've got it covered, Kate replied confidently. You just stay safe. I'll be in touch soon. Keanu ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the reality of the situation sink in. He had taken the first step. The hardest part was over, but now came the real fight, bringing the story to the world, exposing the truth. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be risks and there would be consequences. But Keanu was prepared. He couldn't let fear control him anymore. As Keanu walked away from the alley, his mind flashed back to Claire Williamson's cold smile, her words echoing in his head. You're playing with fire, Keanu. When it burns, you'll wish you never got involved. But Keanu was no stranger to fire. He had fought battles before, albeit in a different world. This time, though, the stakes were much higher. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the truth. The next few days passed in a blur. Keanu kept his head down, remaining in the shadows while Kate worked behind the scenes, contacting sources, verifying the information Keanu had given her. Every call was like a lifeline, connecting the dots between what Keanu had found and the network that had been operating in the dark for so long. Little by little, the pieces started to fit together, and the picture that emerged was far worse than Keanu could have imagined. The corruption went deeper than just corporate malfeasance. It reached into government, law enforcement, and beyond. The people who had been pulling the strings were untouchable, powerful figures with influence over entire industries, and Keanu had accidentally become the catalyst for exposing it all. But the danger wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. Keanu knew that Claire and her associates wouldn't just let him walk away. They would come for him, soon, if not already. But for now, he had a small victory. The truth was out, and Kate was working tirelessly to bring it to the public eye. Keanu knew the battle was far from over, but he had taken the first step. And as long as he had the truth on his side, he would keep fighting. Because when you uncover something this dark, you have two choices: turn away or face it head-on. And Keanu wasn't the type to turn away. The battle had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The weeks that followed were tense and unpredictable. Keanu's life had taken a dramatic turn, and he felt the weight of every decision bearing down on him. What had once been an ordinary day, filled with the usual pressures of fame and work, was now a faraway memory. The shadow of Claire Williamson's organization loomed large over everything, and Keanu knew that he couldn't rest until he saw this through to the end. Kate Sullivan had kept him updated, and each conversation made the mystery even more twisted. The deeper they dug, the more they uncovered. But they also learned that the forces Keanu was up against were not just organized, they were ruthless. Every lead they chased seemed to be followed by a sudden disappearance or a dead end. It was as if Claire had eyes everywhere, watching their every move, and Keanu could feel the pressure mounting. Still, Keanu refused to back down. The truth was too important to be buried again, and yet, even as the pieces fell into place, the puzzle remained incomplete. Claire's ultimate goals were still shrouded in secrecy, and Keanu knew there was a much larger scheme unfolding that he hadn't yet fully uncovered. The moment of truth arrived unexpectedly. Keanu had been in hiding, trying to stay out of sight, when Kate contacted him with new, startling information. "Keanu, we've got a breakthrough," Kate's voice crackled over the phone. "We've been tracking a major financial transaction. Claire's network is connected to something much bigger than we initially thought. I think we've found the final piece of the puzzle." Keanu's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the moment they'd been waiting for? "What do you mean, the final piece?" Keanu asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "There's a meeting scheduled, a covert one. It's happening in the next 24 hours. The top people behind Claire's operation will be there, including Claire herself. We think they're planning something massive. If we can get the evidence from this meeting, we'll have everything we need to expose them." Keanu's mind raced. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, but it was also the most dangerous move yet. He had no idea how much time he had before Claire's people caught on to their plan. There was no turning back now. "I'm in," Keanu replied, his voice firm. "Give me the details, I'll be there." The meeting was set to take place in a high-security location, an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of the city, far from prying eyes. Kate arranged for an inside contact, someone she trusted, to sneak Keanu in. He couldn't afford to be seen or caught. If Claire discovered he was there, it would all be over. The pressure was unbearable, but Keanu knew what was at stake, the V. Night before the meeting, Keanu couldn't sleep. He sat in his small apartment, staring out the window at the lights of the city, wondering how much longer he could keep this up. It was a battle he couldn't walk away from, but he was aware of the risks. If they failed, if Claire found out what they were planning, there would be no escaping the consequences. At dawn the next day, Keanu received the signal. It was time. He quickly gathered the small bag of equipment Kate had given him, hidden cameras, a recording device, and a burner phone to communicate with her during the operation. Every part of him was on edge as he made his way to the rendezvous point. Once inside the mansion, Keanu was led through dark corridors and into a large, ornate room. It was clear that whoever owned this place had money, lots of it. But now it was nothing more than a decaying shell of its former grandeur. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and mildew. He had to be quick. As he set up the devices in strategic locations, his thoughts raced. How much longer could he keep this up? How much more danger could he face before it all came crashing down? Finally, the door opened, and Keanu heard the voices of the people he had been waiting for. He hid in the shadows, his breath shallow, his heart pounding. There she was, Claire Williamson, walking into the room with several of her associates. They were all dressed in dark suits, their faces cold and unreadable. Keanu could see the power they exuded, the way they carried themselves like they had the world in the palm of their hands. "Let's begin," Claire's voice rang out, smooth and confident. Keanu strained to hear, knowing this was his only chance to uncover what they were planning. The conversation started innocuously enough, with business talk, money, investments, and deals. But as Keanu listened, something changed. The language shifted. Claire's words were more cryptic, revealing a level of manipulation and control that Keanu hadn't fully grasped before. She was not just involved in illegal activities. No, Claire was orchestrating a massive operation that could change the course of global markets, influence governments, and bend the very fabric of society to her will. This wasn't about money. This was about power. And Keanu had just uncovered the full scope of the network she was running. His mind raced with the implications, but before he could process it further, one of Claire's associates made a sharp motion toward the recording devices hidden in the room. Keanu's blood ran cold. They had found the cameras. Claire's cold eyes swept the room, locking onto Keanu's hidden position. "I knew you'd come, Keanu," she said, her voice laced with ice. "Did you really think you could outsmart me?" In that instant, Keanu realized how close he had come to losing everything, but he wasn't going down without a fight. There was still a sliver of hope, still a chance to bring this all to light. With his heart pounding, Keanu made a run for it, his mind focused on one thing: survival. Claire's people would be on his tail in seconds, but he couldn't let them catch him. Not now, not when the truth was so close to breaking free. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The night air felt like ice against Keanu's skin as he sprinted through the darkened hallways of the mansion. His mind raced faster than his feet could carry him, the sounds of footsteps echoing behind him, growing louder with each passing second. Claire and her associates were closing in on him, but there was no turning back now. Not when the truth was within reach, not when everything he'd worked for was about to come to a head. He ducked into a narrow stairwell, trying to put distance between himself and the people chasing him. The adrenaline was coursing through his veins, his breath coming in sharp bursts as he climbed 2 steps at a time, barely able to think straight. The escape plan was all in place. But now, everything depended on one critical moment: getting out of the mansion with the evidence intact. Keanu's mind was sharp as a razor. He knew that his next move had to be precise, no room for error. He reached the top of the stairwell and saw a small door that led to a service exit. His heart leaped with hope. It was his way out. But before he could make a move, a sharp voice rang out from behind him. "You really thought you could just walk away, Keanu?" Claire's voice was cold, laced with a venom that sent a chill down his spine. Keanu spun around to face her, his back to the door now. Claire stood at the bottom of the stairs, flanked by 2 of her associates. They were armed, their hands steady on their weapons, but Keanu stood his ground. His mind raced. He had to think fast. This was no longer just a matter of exposing the truth. It was a fight for his life. "You've made a mistake, Claire," Keanu said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "You don't realize how far this has gone. This isn't just about you anymore. People are going to hear what you've done." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You're delusional, Keanu. Do you really think anyone will believe you? You're just an actor who stumbled into something he doesn't understand. People won't care about your little story. They'll forget about you the moment you disappear." Keanu could see the smirk forming on Claire's face, but he wasn't about to back down. He had come too far. Too much was on the line. "I don't think so," Keanu said, his voice cutting through the tension in the air. "You've underestimated me, Claire, and now you're going to pay for it." In that moment, time seemed to slow. Keanu's mind flashed back to the beginning of this journey, the moment he decided to go incognito as a janitor. He had no idea what he was stepping into then, but he had found something much larger than he could have imagined. The journey had been full of danger, deception, and betrayal, but it had also taught him something important: that the truth always has a way of coming to light. And now, he was going to make sure it did. Keanu took a deep breath and bolted for the exit. The room erupted into chaos as Claire's associates gave chase, but Keanu was faster. His training from years of performing action scenes and his own natural instincts kicked in as he maneuvered through the winding corridors. He didn't have much of a plan other than to stay one step ahead and make sure he didn't get caught. The sound of footsteps was closer now, too close. Just as Keanu reached the exit, he heard a gunshot ring out. The bullet whizzed past him, grazing his arm, but Keanu kept running. The sting of pain was sharp, but it didn't slow him down. He burst through the exit door, his body propelled forward into the cold night air. For a brief moment he felt like he had escaped, but then he heard another sound, faint but unmistakable. The sound of an engine starting. Keanu turned to see a black car speeding down the long driveway toward him. He wasn't going to outrun it, not on foot, but he had one more trick up his sleeve. He ducked into a nearby alley and pushed himself to the limit. His heart was pounding in his chest, but he couldn't stop now. He had to get the evidence out, get the story to Kate. His entire future depended on it. As he ran, he saw the familiar shape of a motorcycle parked on the side of the alley. A quick glance revealed that it was the bike of his old stunt double, Ben, who had been in contact with Kate. Keanu didn't hesitate. He jumped on the bike, revving the engine as he sped out of the alley, leaving the black car in the dust. His pulse was racing as he tore through the streets, weaving in and out of traffic, the wind whipping past him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to see a message from Kate. "It's all coming together. Just stay safe. We'll expose them." Keanu's heart swelled with a sense of relief. The endgame was finally within reach. They were going to bring down Claire and her entire network. He couldn't let anything stop him now. He made his way to the pre-arranged meeting point with Kate. The plan was set. They had the evidence, the recordings, the proof of Claire's operations. The world would know the truth, no matter how powerful. Claire and her network were. When Keanu finally met Kate in person, he felt the weight of the past weeks lift off his shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but they had a plan. Together they would bring the story to light, and Claire's reign of manipulation would come to an end. As they parted ways, Keanu couldn't help but reflect on the journey he had taken. From the janitor in a small, nondescript office building to the hero who had uncovered a conspiracy that threatened to change the world, he had come a long way, and though the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, he was ready, because in the end it wasn't just about the fame or the fight, it was about standing up for what was right. Keanu had found his purpose, and now it was time to see it through. The truth would always find its way to the surface. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from.